Jones cap on.
Nice. Awesome. We got some merch going. Got to get the merch happening. Yeah. All right. We are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Zeitgeist on a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Jane Roper, and we are so psyched to have with us tonight, live from New Orleans, two-time Grammy winner, singer-songwriter extraordinaire, Ms. Rickie Lee Jones. Welcome, Rickie Lee.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yay. Happy to have you. And hopefully we won't, you're in the middle of the thunderstorm, so hopefully we won't have a blackout in the middle, but
yeah.
But whatever. We'll work with it. To those of you who are joining us for the first time and you're like, who the heck is, what's going on? What is the Zeitgeist? What is a Mighty Blaze? Who are you people? We are a 100% volunteer-powered social media organization that we got started right at the beginning of the pandemic to help bring authors and books out to the masses, knowing that so many book tours and things were canceled, and we're going strong. We've done hundreds of interviews. We have shows that stream 7 days a week. That bring you everything from mystery writers to celebrity memoirs to literary fiction and everything in between. So we're so excited to have with us tonight Rickie and to talk about her incredible memoir, Last Chance Texaco. There it is. We got it going in stereo. Such a great book. And I told you, as we were getting started, but I got to confess, I've been mostly, although I'm a huge champion of the paper book and I prefer to read books, for memoirs, I love listening. And what is so great about listening to this is hearing your voice and also getting to hear you sing along the way and laugh along the way. So, I want people to buy the book, but if you're an audiobook person, go for it because it's just so much fun. And I could tell you seem to have fun recording it too. Was that fun doing that audiobook thing?
It was. I did it in my bedroom over about a month, and the producer I worked with was from Arizona, from Phoenix. So we shared this thing of growing up in the desert. So it was a little funner than it might have been otherwise.
Right.
Talking about Wallace and Ladmo, that's the kids show over there.
Oh yeah.
Only we would know.
That's cool. Yeah, you had I was gonna say you had such a fascinating childhood, and you cover a lot of this in your book.
Yeah.
You were in the desert, you're a little desert flower, and right from the beginning, you're talking about some of your experiences interacting with nature in the desert. But then your family moved around a lot too, right? You had a sort of a peripatetic nomad-like childhood.
So I think one of the things that's wonderful about the early part of the book is that I'm telling the story through my child eyes. And sometimes I switch out of it to tell you, what's going on in the larger picture of us moving and my mother and my father. But I tried to create the feel. Well, I had to, I had to create the feeling of childhood. The song I was using as the map is called On Saturday Afternoons in 1963. It was one of the early on the first records, just a little short moment of childhood. And that was the basis. That song was what I wanted to use to talk about the year 1963. And I had many years to do that. That was the first chapters I worked on. And I think they're the most complete. They're the most intact and succinct, because as years go by, my life becomes less intact. And so the writing also becomes a little jazzier.
Yeah, right. For sure. That's a great point. And there is a really different feel from the beginning of the book, and you're looking at childhood through this lens that's very, very clear and crystal. And there's still little digressions and stuff, but then it does get a bit more free ranging when you get more into your young adulthood and your career and everything. So before we get too much farther, I just want to make sure people know you can win a copy of this puppy if you put a comment or a question in the feed there on the comments on the side. So I just want to make sure people know that. But yeah, I mean, the way you captured the I love how you talk not only about like the fun stuff of your childhood, but also like the struggles and the stuff that so much of, like trying to get that acceptance or being from a family that's a little different, or knowing at an early age that you're kind of different from a lot of kids around you. That was very cool. And then of course your adolescence. I mean, that like blew my mind that you're at 14. My kids are 14, right? I know what 14-year-olds are like. You're hitchhiking around the country, like hanging out with hippies. And
yes. As I got older and thought about how young that was, it was kind of horrifying. But at the time, when you're 14, you're the oldest you've ever been.
Of course.
And that's very old. And I thought that I could adapt and cope with anything. And I wanted to be out there. And I placed myself in incredible danger. But it was almost as if I was on this ride, and no harm came to me. It almost came. I saw bad things. I met bad people, but no harm came to me.
Yeah, it seems like you dodged a lot of bullets. I mean, you especially as like a young, attractive woman out there on the road.
Like bringing pot in from Mexico. That was a very dangerous thing to do. And it just sounded like a lark to me. And
ignorance is bliss, I guess. Yeah.
When I write about it now, I go, would I still be in jail now? Would they have ever let me out?
Right. Seriously. Oh my God.
If I go to Mexico now, will they arrest me? What will happen?
Right. How do you feel like your very unique childhood and adolescence kind of shaped the kind of songwriter and artist you became?
I guess, when you say that, I the first thing that comes to mind is that the music shaped the kind of person that I was. I don't see them as separate. They're just both being fired together. That music is an integral part of what I am. So living a wild life is an expression of the kind of music that I'm made of. It doesn't, because I think you can write a perfectly quiet little song and a raucous song. And it doesn't matter if you sit in your office every day or if you're out among the people. The thing that your heart is made of is what your heart is made of.
Right.
I tend to think that the wilder people write the quieter songs because they find relief in them.
Interesting.
The quieter people, like, I could be totally wrong, but like the guys in the Rolling Stones, when they get off stage, they're probably light their pipe and play cricket, right? But they're writing.
Right.
They're writing,
doing needlepoint and
totally
reading poetry. Right. Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, that's a great point. I think for a lot of artists, you get to do something on the stage or on the canvas or whatever that you can't quite express in your own life. And I mean, and your work, a lot of your your songs, but also like the book itself, I thought, it has this beautiful dreamy kind of quality to it, where every once in a while we'll kind of like go off into the ether and like hear a little bit of poetry, or like, oh, there's a Simon and Garfunkel lyric that you're just bringing in, and that was great. And it really it showed the way music is like really threaded through you, and it's just essential to who you are.
I wanted the book to feel like fiction because I've hardly read any memoirs, but when I've read them, they're stiff. They don't have the possibility for expansion. This is what I did. This is where I put it. This is how I said it. That's it. And I thought, and I am interested in what Ava Gardner wore when she first met Frank Sinatra. Don't get me wrong, but I'd rather, she didn't tell me either. So I'd rather read, I'd rather read fiction. So I tried to weave it in a much larger palette, the way you would, so that we could have the enjoyment we have in real life, because in real life, we're operating on so many levels. But when we write a memoir, it's like a little kid's diary. So I just wanted to escape that altogether. And so in that way, I guess I've read a few people say it's like my music. In that way, it's like my music, I guess.
Yeah. No, and I think that it is a very musical memoir, and I think that's great. It doesn't read like a normal, or not normal, but it doesn't read like anybody else's. Like, it's uniquely yours, which is great. That's what it should be. It should be your voice, so let's see. Gosh, there are so many things I wanted to touch on. One of the things, in sort of the process of writing this, you revisited a lot of painful things, right? You visited a lot of joy, and part of the fun of it was like when your career was really taking off, and this sort of like, woohoo, here it goes, and we were right there with you, like Saturday Night Live, and like, getting a record deal. But you also revisited a lot of painful stuff, which I think like good memoir should and does. From like your relationship with your dad, which could be hard, from some of your your love relationships with Tom Waits and others, and from your addiction. What was it like going back and really delving into that stuff?
I don't know that it was ever going back. It sounds. We live this life in layers, right? And although we refer to the past as back, it's not really back. It's just one of the layers. We're always carrying it with us. The past is always here. So I guess traumatic events make us live the past as if it were present. But traumatic or joyful, it's never in back of us. It's just part of the whole room of furniture. And some of it is you. But all over there is all the days I spent with my mother, and it's all here all the time. The challenge is, do I want to tell you about it? Do I want you to know the personal things that I've kept, in Scorpio fashion, very secret, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I spent a long time as I wrote, because at first I told everything, and then I might let somebody read it and watch their reaction and then go, whoops, shouldn't have told her that. And learned. And so one of the most important lessons I learned was, don't tell people everything. They don't want to know everything. They think they do, but they don't, because it can hurt them. It can change how they feel about the music. I went through stuff, and I am stronger for it, but you might not be stronger for hearing what I went through. And my aim is to lift everybody up, to make it a great story, a great ride when you're done.
Yep.
That's the way that it's fiction. I picked the themes, and I stayed with the themes for the telling of the story.
Right.
There were lots of other things that happened, but they would weigh the book so one more discussion about one attempted kidnapping or rape, because there's more than the one.
Sure.
But it would weigh the book so terribly. And I thought, I want people to know that women have these terrible things happen to them all throughout their lives. It doesn't just happen once, it happens a lot. But as I wrote it and read it, this is really messing up the memoir. As much as I'd like to serve that greater good, the weight now, because I can't help but not know how I'm making it for people to read, right? So it's not just for me, it's for you too.
Right.
So I carefully, so back to the painful things. So the painful things, there's only a few places that are still wounds, and you can see them when you read the book. It's very clearly that it just never quite stops hurting.
Right.
And I figured my audience probably already knows that, so that won't be a surprise. That I carry wounds with me, and so do we all. So it was okay. That part wasn't so hard.
Yeah.
The thing that was challenging was seeing how much bitterness was still attached to painful things. And each time I wrote it and went, wow, you are really angry. And then the next time went, well, let's take that out. Just say it one day. No, you're still not angry. And when finally I was able to go, no anger, all forgiveness, all love. Go all the way back to the early part and just tell this story with love.
Yeah.
But actually, when I did that, that was what I was left with. For the most part, I was left with a very healed place about Tom Waits, my dad, things, my brother's accident, which was just like a living wound.
Yeah.
For the most part, many of them are so much better for the telling of the stories.
Right. Yeah. Your brother lost his leg in an accident. Yeah. I mean, writing, yeah, that's the thing. Like when we write, and as a memoirist myself, like an essayist, like you work through shit when you're writing through it, and you learn things about it that you didn't realize, thoughts and feelings that you had about it, you might have not realized were there. And then you write them and you're like, oh, I feel this way. Like, wow.
Yeah.
But it's also really true what you say. Like you have to, I think sometimes people feel like a memoir is just, well, hey, it's your life. You're just going to like throw it all out there, but you can't. You have to shape a story, and you got
to write a good book.
Right.
I also learned this. I hope I don't hurt anybody when I say this, but I learned this reading the Beach Boy. What's his name? Not Carl, but the really famous one.
Brian Wilson.
Brian Wilson's. Because he told excruciating things that had happened to him with his father. And I says to myself, I'm never going to be able to hear that song and not think of that thing that I just read ever.
Yeah.
And so I went, I'm not going to do that. That was a lesson learned. I think it's horrible what happened, but I really wish you hadn't told me some of it.
Yeah,
because it's taken away the music forever for me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Right, you don't want to really change the art too much for people.
I don't.
You want to let them come to it in their own way, and I think probably also for your own protection. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be like famous, right? But for fame, like imagine you're putting yourself out there. That was actually one of the things that I found most fascinating. It was more toward the end of the book where you really talked about what fame meant and the experience of feeling like, as you were continuing to evolve as an artist, right, and doing different kinds of music that reflected where you were at a given time and where you wanted to go, things you wanted to explore, the feeling of this pressure on you, like, no, be that person you were in the last album. Whereas like you're a living, breathing person, an artist, and fame really sets you up for being like, I want to grow, but you want me to be who you want me to be.
Right. Fame and success.
Yeah.
And money. When that thing of success, I've been thinking about it a lot in the last few months since the book came out, the thing of success, because I think we almost set it up so we'll never attain it. It'll always be a carrot in front of us we're going towards. And for me, the moment I went, oh, I'm going to get that carrot, I got it. It's like, here, take it back.
Yeah,
right. So having success can be, so quickly can be hard because we're supposed to spend our lives trying to get a thing that and I got it right away. So fame has its own weird life so this is the wonderful and difficult thing that this job that so many people covet. Yeah. So many kids covet, so many people want this because there is a glory to having people know your name. My friend said, why are you sad? People know your name around the world. And I was like, yeah, I guess they do know. And I'm not going to say, so what? Yeah, they do know my name around the world. Celebrate that. Be glad about that. But the thing is, it doesn't change one way that we're formed. It doesn't change how when we're done, if I think I'm too fat, I'll go look in the mirror and go, oh, you're so ugly, you're so fat. That never changes no matter how many people around the world know you. success and saying nobody will love you because of it. They'll like you, they'll know your name, they'll talk about you, but the room that you live in is unchanged. And that's a fantastically difficult lesson to learn, right? That fame didn't bring any fucking happiness. It just brought it.
Right.
And it's okay. It's not a bad thing, but it's not any of the things you think it is. It's the guy across the street going, I know her, and the ways that makes him feel because he knows a famous person and what he thinks she is. It had nothing to do with reality. But that's a part of the job that, took my whole life to go, I accept that, and I'll treat that carefully and just keep trying to bring as much love as I can to people. Bringing love is a way of deflecting all that attention. If you just say, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to try to do as much healing in it while I tell my story as I can, because if I make it all about me, that's so much attention that it would kill me. So for me, all that fame is really, really hard. I know you said that at the beginning.
I mean, hearing you talk about it, I mean, it's so clear. You wrote a beautiful passage about fame that I want to read, and you say, but you also talk about like how you find happiness through that road. You say, I lived a life of destiny and chance and chose a different road from the big wealth and fame. And it must have been the one on which I was most likely to find happiness at last. Fame is a tincture made for the brightest and deepest souls among us. We have what it takes to withstand it. You got to withstand it. Fame was never meant for the 15-minute brand. This troubadour life is only for the fiercest hearts, only for those vessels that can be broken to smithereens and still keep beating out the rhythm for a new song. That's great. And I think you made yourself, I totally get what you're saying. Like, you don't want to reveal all of you, right? You need to keep some part of yourself to yourself. But what I think what makes the book work is you did make yourself vulnerable enough to show your failings and show those moments of weakness and show those moments of like when you felt like your career wasn't going the way you wanted it to be going. And that's what's healing, right? That's what I think merciful authors and people do is they show their pain, and I think that
they show their vulnerabilities, and I did want to protect me, yes, but most of all, I wanted to tell a great story. Yeah, and the great story wouldn't be everything that happened to me, because this one book is just this. There's so much more. Right. And you would have been exhausted. So some of it was, you would have been exhausted by page 75. Some of it was to, the wisdom to go protect yourself. Everybody doesn't need to know everything about you. But if I really would have thought that would have been the best book, I probably would have gone there.
Yeah. So one of the other things I really thought was fascinating about your book was, you talked a lot about sexism, right? And double standards. And from, when you were, on the road as sort of like, your hippie hitchhiker self, you got picked up like and told like you were sort of brought into juvenile detention for being in danger of living a lewd and lascivious lifestyle,
That's right.
That's nuts. But then you also talked about like how later, you were, some of the double standards you saw in the music industry, right? Where like the guys were allowed to like mess up and be like falling down drunk on stage or whatever and like have but it was like the women weren't afforded that same forgiveness. It was considered, yeah.
Well, think of Janis Joplin as opposed to Keith Richards, or, and my few times that I drank a bit in the second tour, and promoters wouldn't hire me for years. For years, I had trouble working. But the other guys can, break the hotels, and then it makes them somehow more authentic. I think that this is a trickling down from how women are treated and viewed in society. We're supposed to be not just better, but we're supposed to be better behaved.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. We've got a different sort of standard to live up to. Yeah. I thought it was interesting the thing you said about Joni Mitchell as well. Talk about that a bit. The weird.
What part? What did I say?
Well, you were talking about how critics were sort of comparing, sort of putting you and Joni Mitchell in the same box.
Sure.
Long-haired ladies with guitars.
When I came out in 1979, Joni had been around for 10 years or so. She was really the only female singer-songwriter, period. Nobody spoke about my hero, Laura Nyro. There were singers, but no singer-songwriters. So, first of all, probably anybody would have been compared to Queen Joan. But because I bore an uncanny resemblance to her, and still do, I still read it 40 years later, 40 years in a big career. So that was, so one of the things I think I did quite accidentally, Jade, was hurt her feelings, or else piss her off more likely.
Wow.
On an early interview, somebody asked me, and this is important. This is a good question. I don't know. Maybe they said, do you like Joni Mitchell? And I probably said, well, I don't think she's a jazz singer, which I still don't think she's a jazz singer.
Yeah, she's a folk singer.
Yeah, she's a folk singer, and she can sing whatever she wants, but she's a folk singer. Oh, man. she's still upset about that.
That's too bad.
But the thing that happens with women is, and we all learn from each other. We learn probably more from men because there are more men in music than women. But we also might pick a woman or two who inspires us. It doesn't really matter if they're men or women. But the press was, and maybe still is, always looking for a woman for you to say you learned from. And if you do, then they'll compare you to her forever. And I noted look how loud I got when I'm talking about it. And I noted that, and I know that the many women who clearly were coming from Rickie's school and not Joni's school weren't saying my name. And when people wrote about them, they go, Rickie who, huh? And at the time, I felt bad. I went, wow, I'm not making any money, man. How hard would it be to go? She is my teacher. I love her so much. But I understood why, because the moment we women tend to say, oh, I love Nina Simone, because nobody sounds like Nina Simone, so nobody could accuse you of copying Nina Simone, right?
Right.
We all love Nina Simone.
Right. Sure.
But so that's a really important thing to note, that women, while men can emulate or be inspired by one another, say Steve Tyler and Mick Jagger, right? Steve Tyler, is he the singer in? He totally did a Mick Jagger imitation, right? But nobody talks about that. And the Bob Dylan, you don't have to live like a refugee.
Right? Oh yeah.
Totally. But nobody took from him his power by over comparing him to Bob Dylan. But they do it with women. So I hope. I edited this book so much. I don't know if I left any of that in the book, but in one early version, there was some discussion about how women are always compared to one another in a way to diminish, and men are not.
Yeah.
And I believe that then, and I believe it now.
Yeah, I think unfortunately it hasn't changed a whole lot in a lot of ways. I'm watching I mean, this is slightly different, but like watching the blowback that Simone Biles is getting about, withdrawing from the Olympics. And I'm trying to imagine, like, if the same thing happened with a guy, would they get that kind of blowback? And, there's a lot going on. So I had kind of like a nerdy, crafty writing question for you. Yeah. So what is it like, how do you compare the experience of writing a book with the experience of writing a song? Pretty different.
A book takes a long time, and it's about myself, while a song is an imaginary thing. It's very rarely autobiographical.
Yeah.
I can weave myself into it, but or use little pieces of reality, but it's made from my imagination, and it can take a long time. I can spend years on it, but I think that's only because I'm frightened and lazy, frightened of finishing stuff, which is another story. So it's a different job, I think.
Aren't we all? No, yeah, it's rough. Yeah. Yeah, it's a different kind of experience for sure. It's like a marathon versus I don't know, a song's not a sprint.
Well, carrying a thread throughout many, many pages and developing it's just really different than a song, which is the opposite. In a very short amount of time, I have to tell you everything.
Right.
And inspire you to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, a book is quite the opposite.
Yeah. All right. So I have one more question, and I know we have a ton of questions from viewers. So I'm going to ask this one last question. Actually, one and a half, because one of them is from a viewer. So as I mentioned, backstage, we're sorry to hear that Chuck E. Weiss, who is the inspiration behind the song "Chuck E.'s in Love" that so many people love, recently passed away. Can you talk a little bit about Chuck and what he meant to you, who he was and what he meant to you?
Sure. I met Chuck and Tom together in front of the Troubadour. I write about it in the book. It's a very nice passage, I think. And the beginning of a new part of my life, a better phase of my life, the end of. In fact, in a way, that night is the end of the old one and the beginning of the new one. Just personally, it's not about Chuck, but about me. But Chuck was there amongst this crew of no-count guys, kind of leftover hippies. Some of them had long hair, but they weren't really hippies. They were just creeps with long hair. Some of them were really interesting. There was one Jewish boy who lived in the Fairfax district. And he knew everything about bebop. His name, in fact, was Bebop Dubov. And I hung out with him a little bit after I met him there that night because he was such a cool singer. Mose Allison kind of singer.
Oh, yeah.
And there's Paul Brody, who had a little bit to do with radio and the group Love in the early years or late 60s. And all kind of characters assembled there, kind of like a Damon Runyon short story in front of the Troubadour. And I walked out into it, and this is how I met them. My friend Ivan All said, "Wow, it's like the Jets and the Sharks out here." And I said, "When you're a jet, all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day." And Ivan said, "When you're a jet, you're the swingin'est thing, little boy, you're a man, little man, you're a king." And over there, Chuck went, "You're never alone, you're never disconnected, and there, you're always your own." There on the sidewalk, everybody who knew a line took a line, kind of like, in a way like rap, doing their own line of that song up to the end. Waits took a couple lines, Chuck took a couple lines, and we sang the Jet song there. And that is the truth. That's how we met that night.
Yeah. And you said, I love that scene so much. That was so much fun. And like you said at the time, you knew it was magic at the time. It was one of those moments, you have those moments in life, you were like, "Oh, I'm aware at this moment it's magic, not just in retrospect." And Yeah.
That's right. They glowed before me. It often gave me the feeling, even at the time, but especially after, of being on a road already written out. Not the whole road, but from here to here, it's written. And then from here to here will be another thing. And those golden moments, when they happen, so perfectly synchronized, you have to know that you're on a magical path.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I have one question from a reader, a viewer, Dakota Summer, who wanted me to ask. So the very, like, toward the end of your book, right, you get pretty compressed about like the last period of your life. Yeah. Do you have thoughts about writing a part 2?
Yeah, I am writing it. I was writing it even then, but it'll be a little different form as opposed to a chronological thing. I'm writing these little stories, little vignettes about people that I knew. And I know people would like me to and maybe I will, they'd like me to expand on the last 30 years. But that's the story of my family for the most part, and discussion of my family. I think if I do it, I'd rather do it in film. I think this book form, it's better. It's more exciting. These kinds of things. So I'm hoping to do theater, the books, and maybe television or film. To tell about all the different revolving stories of the Jones life. But I know it was compressed, and some people went, "Oh, she's wrapping it up." But I was wrapping it up. It felt like that book, I tried and tried. I said, from the beginning, I said, I am not ending that book in 1984. That book said, yes, you are. You are ending us now. We are done.
We're done.
Yeah, so I had to end it. It wanted to be done there.
Yeah, you gotta listen to the work. You gotta listen to the art and decide when is the art complete? When are you gonna? I love the idea of doing something in theater, film. That'd be amazing.
Yes.
Right, so we got a question from Etrisor Leaves. I can't quite understand that, but I'd love to know how Rickie wrote her book in terms of discipline. Did you write for a certain amount of time a day? Did you ever want to give up? That's a great question.
Yes. I wrote the book initially, started about 10 years ago. And so it was a process of learning to write. I think initially, wake up, maybe I'll write because I don't have a job. I'll write some today. And one of the first chapters was the chapter about my mother. There's stories about my mother's orphanage years. And so I liked how that felt. And then my stories as a kid. By the time of 4 or 5 years ago, yes, I wrote so many versions of this that I just would sometimes take them and just throw them away and start again because they were too long or the papers got mixed up. I don't know why, but it feels like I was on a road because because the early versions just wouldn't manifest. Finally, when I was speaking to my friend here in New Orleans, and he said, I like your stories, but what's the theme of your book? I hear a couple themes, but what are your themes? And I went, themes? So, what do you mean themes?
Yeah, right.
It's a memoir. So, so I sussed it out for what are the themes that keep showing up in my life and my mother's life. It's hope, it's family, it's magic. And then let's see if those themes sustain themselves throughout my life. Oh, look at that, they do. And then those were the stories that I chose to.
Yeah, that you wove through it all. That's great. Yeah. That's awesome. My pal Jane Foley says she's so excited to be here. Rickie, you've been influential across so many genres of music. What music was the most influential to you as you shaped your own style and made your own mark? You list so many musical influences in the book, which was part of the fun of reading it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it's a kind of music. It's more artists. I love West Side Story, but I don't care much for South Pacific. I love Van Morrison, and I I understand Leonard Cohen for his genius, but if I'm sitting by myself, I'll probably listen to Bad Company before I listen to those guys. So it's a song, probably. And you'd be surprised what artists I go to, because they've written a particular song that, like Bad Company, which is about a cowboy after the Civil War wondering, and that just really, I felt so bad for that guy and all that I am at, because that's what I do. I think when I hear a song is I build a fiction all around it. If it's something cool by Billy Barnes about a dame who walks into a bar and orders a drink, she says, I bet you couldn't imagine I was once loved. And from the time I first heard it when I was 22, I, oh my God, I know that woman, and built a thing. So I think it's songs that get me more than genres.
Particular songs. Yeah. No, I hear that. Rachel, we have other questions back there popping up. In the meantime, talk about songs. I was first introduced to your music through the song "We Belong Together," which a friend of mine put on a mixtape, which is like a perfect, like, nice, like early '90s kind of thing to do. But I remember we talked about it. We're like, who is Johnny the King? And like, wait, what's going on here? And but the way I think what's unusual, there are not a ton of songwriters in the mainstream who like create characters the way you do. And it seems like you had a revelation at some point in your songwriting career, like, I'm going to create fictional characters and put them in like, it doesn't have to be first person, everything.
Exactly. Because I sucked at writing about myself and my feelings. To go back to Joni Mitchell, everybody was singing and trying to write like Joni Mitchell, who can, talk about how she feels. And just before I left, I said, you're that, then you and me, and this and this. And I couldn't do it at all. But once I made up somebody, I could say anything. I could go anywhere through their lives and their skin. I did that first with Easy Money. And once I'd done it, then I found Youngblood. And then on the next record, I went to Company was the song Company was probably the closest I'll ever get to, a love song that I wrote about somebody I knew. But the rest of them, they're all my wonderful imaginary places.
Yeah. How awesome. You create that world for yourself. So Greg wants to know, will you incorporate, that's a great question. Will you incorporate reading any passages from your book on your upcoming tour?
Yes.
Cool.
Well, I had planned to do a tour of it. And, but because of COVID, this and that, and this and that, everything got canceled. So the shows that are coming up, it's possible I'll do that in Tucson. But thank you for reminding me, because I hadn't even thought of it, and I think it's a really good idea. So I think I'll try to imagine a way to do that. Thanks for asking.
Totally. You should absolutely do that. Do a quick reading. Tim would like to know, who would you most like to do a song with? Well, you haven't already, I assume.
Well, yeah. I've all my life wanted to sing with Van Morrison. That's all, not writing or recording, but just to hear our voices reverberating together. I don't think that's going to happen. Short of that, maybe a Beatle, but
you've only got a couple left of those, so
that's right.
Get going on it. Was it that I couldn't remember? You had a great anecdote in your book about how you call a hotel room and like talk to the manager of the
Monkees.
Oh, it was the Monkees, right?
Yeah,
right. You were so like psyched about the Monkees that you tracked down the hotel room and the manager. That was great. Yeah. I love that. All right. Do we have any last questions here for our
While you're doing that, I'll tell you a story. Oh, yeah. My freshman year in high school, I went to see the Chambers Brothers play. Do you know who the Chambers Brothers were?
I don't know who they are.
I think there were probably three brothers and a whole family. One of them played guitar. You can still hear that there's a cowbell. Now the time has come Time, no place to run. Do you know that one?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, that's time has come today. So I saw them, and they also did Can't Turn You Loose. And I was just, oh my God. And me and my friend Ray Louse snuck in the backstage and probably, shook their hands. And I overheard where they were staying at the Travel Lodge in downtown. Now, I was 13, I think, and this is an all-black band, understand? So my friend Ray and I hitchhiked to the hotel and knocked on the door, placing these men in horrific danger. And said, "Oh, hi, we saw you at the show last night. We think you're so cool." And the guy let us into the room, which is a room with double beds. We were sitting there, and one of them was in the shower. And I always remember this. And he started to come out of the shower and went, "Oh, I almost came out in my nudie." And had a towel around him. His was Lester. Put on his clothes, came out. He's got 2 pre-teenage girls in his room. And they were so lovely to us. Aww. And I remember I took home a styrofoam cup with me that they'd been drinking water in, and hitchhiked back home. The Chambers Brothers story remains my favorite because I don't think I'll ever be able to meet them, but just when you hear all the horrible things that musicians can do with girls, sure. These guys were perfect. Do you still have
it? Do you still have the styrofoam cup? That I'll never.
No styrofoam cups here.
Okay, I've got a question from my husband here, Alistair, who is a singer-songwriter himself. So he wanted to ask, so many young songwriters get stuck on abstraction. Rickie was a visceral writer from the start. Her songs always put you in a specific time and place. Where did that come from? Was it instinctive, or did you come to some realization early on that you needed to get into the nitty-gritty?
And when you say visceral, can I know what you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean, honey? Honey, what do you mean by visceral?
That's a beautiful question. And
songwriter nerd questions. I don't know if I can get some. I'm guessing he means like sensory and like a lot of specific detail. I'm guessing that's what he means.
I don't know. The closest thing I could come is to say that when you're wandering around the streets and counties of your imagination, you have to make it real for the people. So the more, I don't know how I knew how to do it, except that I'd written poetry as a young girl, as a little girl, and loved telling as much as I could in as few consonants and syllables as possible. The other thing when you're writing a song is you are working with rhythmic syllables. So that took him on a slow train, peeking on the stacks and said that they were rapping it back. And all of that song was just me bebopping. And then I went back and listened and made up words to that. So one of the things you can do when you're writing a song, which I've heard Van Morrison talk, is just make up rhythmic sounds, and people love those as much as they do your very best poetry.
Right, because they can fill in their own words there, right? Yeah, fill in the feeling. Yeah. All right. He clarified here. You can smell the bars, her characters inhabit, and that's.
Well, I guess I'm just good at that.
Yeah, that's a testament.
Thank you.
So, all right, let's announce a winner here as we wrap things up. Who is the winner of Last Chance Texaco? And I already told. If you don't win, I can lend you my copy. Who is it? Oh wait, someone wants to know if you'll. Oh wait, here we go. Okay, Greg Hubbard. Greg Hubbard, you are the winner of Last Chance Texaco. So here's what you got to do. You gotta private message us on our Mighty Blaze Facebook page, or you can email on mightyblaze@gmail.com and put like Rickie Lee Jones winner in the subject line or something. I don't know. We'll find it. We'll get you a book. Give us your address and we'll get you a book.
Thanks, Greg.
Well, I'm not a radio DJ. I don't know how to do contests. And what somebody wanted to know, one last question under the wire. Will your current tour bring you to Atlanta?
No. The closest I'll be to Atlanta, I think, is Nashville. I'm going to do a book reading at one of the big book fairs. I'm sorry, I wish I had the name of it, but I'll be at a book. Oh, I'll also be at the Franklin Theater. So that's still a long ways from Atlanta, but
right. Well, we just put a link to your tour dates up there on the screen, so folks can check it out, and we'll throw up a link to bookshop.org where people can buy your book online if they want to, and also put in a major plug for the audiobook because it's like so fun to hear your voice. And,
it is. It's crazy. Yeah. I gotta tell you, it was hard at first hearing my voice. I mean, I've heard it a lot, but who is going to be able to tell her reading the book? Oh,
no, it's great. It's always awesome to hear authors read their own work because you get like you hear what's behind what's on the page, and that was fantastic. So thank you so much, Rickie. This was awesome. I love talking to you, and I know folks enjoyed hearing from you as well. So thank you, and best of luck with the rest of the tour, and we will be watching out for the sequel to this puppy. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye, Alice.